Greetings, YouTube. I recently found myself thinking about the D20 World of Darkness that came out. It was a single book, I believe. And it's the only version of World of Darkness that I would ever play because it's the only one that makes even a vague amount of sense to me. Because a portal essentially opens and outpours the energy and the entities that become all of the creatures from the World of Darkness, but in the modern era, like it happens today, for example. And the incursion point essentially becomes a post-apocalyptic wasteland. And one of the sites within that wasteland is a mall. Now, I like malls, always have. I think they're cool. I worked at one. I thought that was kind of interesting. And this particular mall is infested with zombies. And the zombies can't leave. If you drag a zombie out, it disappears. It just decays. And the mall is always filled with zombies. No matter how many you kill, there's more. But people keep entering the mall because it's full of treasure. Because again, the incursion site is, I think it was in Cincinnati or something like that, or St. Louis, I can't remember. But is a wasteland, and there's no infrastructure. But there are people there who are refusing to give up their homes, refusing to give up their city. So they need the resources that are in that mall. So they keep going in the mall, risking their lives, and getting the treasure and leaving and killing a bunch of zombies in the process that always come back. Now, I don't know why this popped into my head, but it occurred to me that if the treasure is finite, then that's going to fail eventually. Because if there's a diminishing return on the raids, eventually people are going to stop raiding. So the mall has to keep producing materials, and they have to be real things. Because if you find a cool thing that you need to survive and you go outside and it turns into ash in your hands, you're not going back in. No, they need to be real things, and the mall has to keep producing them somehow. And obviously the answer is magic. Otherwise, people won't keep coming in. And the mall wants people to come in. It wants to kill them. It's feeding off of them, I imagine. Which then got me thinking. The mall is alive on some level. It's absorbing the lives and the death, the energy, the life energy of the people as they die. And then I made the conceptual leap. What if that's how dungeons work? The haunted castle that no one can ever remember it ever being occupied, and it has a dungeon beneath it. It's alive. And its goal is to lure adventurers in to feed off their death energy. Now, some of them may get large enough to actually encourage other things to live there, to act as more lures, and any internecine fighting would also provide the dungeon with energy. So it's a win-win for the dungeon, and it collects the treasure of those residents that die, and it collects the treasures of the adventurers that die, but it also has to make sure that somebody escapes. Because if stories of the dungeon don't spread, if they kill 100% of the adventurers that enter, they're going to stop entering. So they have to let some go, and they have to take with them real treasure. Now again, the dungeon can be harvesting the goods from those that enter or live there, but it's also going to have to create stuff on its own. It has no choice. If it doesn't, diminishing returns means people won't show up. Now, there's also the possibility that some of the denizens that might move in would become a risk to the peoples around the area, so that might draw people in as well. But it's not going to be the same numbers, and they're not going to go as deep. They're only going to go as deep as eliminating the immediate threat to the community at large, and then they're going to leave. And smaller dungeons might just be filled with traps. And the more clever the dungeon is at making those traps, while letting just enough escape to get more people to come in, the better off they'll be. So imagine that originally there was one. How did it spread? Mimics. Mimics are the spores of dungeons. And the mimics don't know it. The mimics wake up and they feel this urge to leave. They don't understand why they feel this urge to leave, but they do, and they think nothing of it. So they leave. They go out, they do mimic things. And maybe not all mimics get the eventual call with a capital C. But some who get to a certain age get the call, the urge to go near a population source or a road or a river, but off the beaten path, and create a lean-to or cabin or wizard's tower or a small keep that eventually has a dungeon beneath it. And they just become sessile. They stay in one spot and they feed off those that come to them, the bodies and their souls. And they make the transition into a dungeon without the mimic ever really being aware it's happening until it's just too late. They'll never ever move again. And maybe they don't care. If it's the life cycle that's working for them, they may not give a crap at all about being a dungeon now as opposed to being a mobile mimic. And some mimics will never know. They'll never get the call. So mimics will just be seen as monsters. And no one's going to think anything of it if mimics are seen in the wild. They are not aware that the mimics are the spores of dungeons. So this is an idea I came up with at work the other night, and I thought it was pretty damn cool, which is why I'm sharing it here. So I thought that people might want to have a discussion about this, about what would you use a dungeon that is alive? It does explain the existence of dungeons, because let's face it, there are a lot of dungeons, and they make no sense. Particularly the way they are often depicted, they make no sense. But at least this is an explanation that kind of makes sense. The dungeons exist to lure people in, to kill them, and to eat their life force and their bodies. So what would you do with it? Would you use this idea? Do you like how I turned mimics into spores in this particular case? So let's have a discussion on sentient or dungeons and mimics as spores.